It's a survival pattern. The same generation that was told to disappear until the streetlights flickered on is now being quietly criticized for being too involved in their children's lives. They were raised on autonomy. Now they're accused of hovering. That contradiction tells you almost everything you need to know about Gen X parents. They grew up unlocking empty houses. Now they make sure someone is home. And people are confused by that. You remember the sound of the front door closing behind you. Silence. A quiet kitchen. A note on the counter. Maybe instructions, maybe not. You learned where the snacks were. You learned how to heat something up. You learned not to complain. You figured things out. Not because you were brave, because you had to. There was space. So much space. Some of it felt freeing. Some of it felt lonely. You told yourself it didn't matter. You handled it. Most people assume this means you're overcompensating. They tell you to just relax and let your kids toughen up the way you did. But that assumption is wrong. What looks like over-involvement isn't panic, it's memory. It's remembering what independence felt like when it came without emotional backup. It's remembering how strength sometimes grew next to silence, and deciding your child won't confuse the two. Between the early 1970s and the early 1990s, something shifted in American households at a scale that hadn't really happened before. Mothers entered the workforce in dramatically higher numbers. Two-income families became normal. Economic survival required it. Children adapted. They let themselves in after school. They microwaved dinner. They learned the rhythm of an empty house. Marketing researchers later described Gen X as one of the least parented generations in modern US history. That sounds harsh, but what it really meant was this: they were expected to manage themselves earlier than most. Grades? Handle it. Friend conflicts? Work it out. Emotional stress? Deal with it. The adults weren't unloving. They were busy. They were tired. They were adjusting to economic realities that required both parents to be gone more often. Gen X internalized something powerful from that environment: self-sufficiency. They learned not to expect intervention. They learned not to expect constant reassurance. They learned that if something broke, you tried to fix it before you asked for help. That daily autonomy shaped their worldview in ways that still echo today. But independence has layers. When a child solves problems alone long enough, they don't just build competence, they also build a private emotional system. They learn how to soothe themselves. They learn how to minimize their needs. They learn how not to be a burden. From the outside, it looks like strength. From the inside, it can feel like distance. Fast forward 30 or 40 years. Now the Latchkey kid is holding the car keys. They have children of their own, and something subtle shifts. They may have sworn they would never hover. They valued the freedom they had. They liked that they weren't micromanaged. They appreciate that independence taught them resilience. But then, their own child walks into a silent room, and suddenly, memory isn't abstract anymore. It's visceral. They remember the quiet afternoons, the unanswered questions, the feeling of having to get it right alone. So when their child struggles, even a little, something activates. Not fear, not weakness, recognition. Many Gen X parents describe a deliberate decision to be more present than their parents were, to ask more questions, to show up more often, to pay attention. And when something serious happens, they don't hesitate. They might not hover during everyday drama. They might let their teenager argue with friends and sort through social friction independently. But if there's injustice, bullying, or real harm, they will walk into that principal's office with intensity. Some have jokingly been called stealth fighter parents, quiet most of the time, invisible even, but when it matters, they deploy. That isn't inconsistency, it's calibration.
Parenting styles along two main dimensions, warmth and structure. Warmth is responsiveness. Structure is expectation. High warmth with high expectation tends to produce the healthiest outcomes. Children who feel supported but also accountable tend to regulate emotions better. They often develop stronger self-esteem, better problem-solving skills, and lower rates of anxiety and depression. They usually perform well academically and navigate friendships more successfully. This style isn't rigid, it isn't permissive, it isn't cold. It says, I care deeply, and I expect you to grow. There's no massive definitive study declaring that Gen X has collectively adopted this model. Generations don't operate in perfect unison. But when you listen to how many Gen X parents describe their approach, the pattern is noticeable. They talk about being present, but not suffocating. They talk about setting boundaries, but staying emotionally available. They talk about letting kids struggle, but not alone. That's not accidental. It's shaped by memory. When you grow up with autonomy, but limited emotional scaffolding, you learn the value of both. You don't want to remove struggle. You want to remove isolation. That's a subtle difference.
Gen X also matured during economic instability. They graduated into recessions. They watched corporate loyalty dissolve. They saw retirement plans shrink. The stability their parents believed in felt fragile to them. So they don't promise their children a smooth road. They know better. Instead, they try to build internal stability. Resilience, adaptability, emotional flexibility. They understand that systems can fail, jobs can disappear, markets can shift. But if a child knows how to think critically, regulate emotions, and ask for help when needed, they're better equipped than someone shielded from every discomfort. This isn't softness, it's strategic toughness.
There's another layer. Gen X remembers life before the internet consumed everything. Embarrassing moments weren't archived. Failure didn't trend. Boredom was normal. Childhood had privacy. Now they're raising children in a world where every milestone can be posted, compared, and judged. For a generation that grew up largely unseen, this constant exposure feels unnatural. They're comfortable with technology, they adapted to it as adults, but they're not native to it. They remember what attention used to feel like when it wasn't quantified. So when they limit screens or question digital culture, it often isn't fear-driven. It's contrast-driven. They've lived both versions. They know what offline presence feels like. They understand the tools, but they question the cost.
Many Gen X parents are caring for aging parents while raising teenagers. They're navigating career plateaus, financial pressure, health changes. They're translating between generations that don't fully understand each other. Boomer parents might accuse them of being too gentle. Gen Z children might accuse them of being too strict. They stand in the middle, trying to preserve resilience without repeating emotional distance, trying to provide warmth without creating fragility. That tension is exhausting, and yet they continue.
One interesting trait often observed in Gen X is their skepticism toward external validation. When you grow up largely managing yourself, you don't build your identity around constant praise. You learn that approval is inconsistent, so as parents, many rely on an internal compass rather than trends. They're less likely to obsess over perfect optics. They may allow their teenager to make the same mistake twice because they understand that learning often requires repetition. They'll step back, and then, at 2 in the morning, when everything collapses emotionally, they'll sit beside their child without judgment. Because they remember what it felt like not to have that option. They aren't trying to control the narrative, they're trying to change the emotional backdrop.
People like you weren't designed for noise. You notice patterns others miss. You feel deeply, and that requires space. If you're a Gen X parent, you aren't trying to rewrite history. You're trying to refine it. You kept the independence. You added the presence. You don't hover because you distrust your child. You show up because you remember what silence felt like. You don't intervene in every conflict, but you make sure your child knows they're not alone in it. That's not contradiction, that's evolution. For a generation once labeled detached or underparented, the simple act of emotional availability is radical. Not dramatic, not flashy, just consistent. You sit in the bleachers, not scrolling, not performing, but actually watching. You're not trying to win a parenting competition. You're trying to break a quiet cycle, and that's harder than people think. If this video felt uncomfortably accurate, subscribe. This channel is for people like you.